Welcome to the C Word, the Conservators podcast. Today we're talking about thinking big. I'm Jenny Mathiasen, an objects conservator based in South Yorkshire.
And I'm Chloe Rumsey, an objects conservator based in Greater Manchester.
Hello, hello. Today we've got a special guest host in the studio. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello both, I'm Simon Stevens and I'm an objects conservator for the Science Museum Group based in Wiltshire.
Nice.
Hi both.
And we've just made you eat pizza with us, so FYI, we do bribe all guest hosts.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to come to my house, then you may be fed either fish and chips or pizza. It is your choice.
Yeah, C-word fuel pizza.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, today we're going to talk about big stuff. Huge things. What's huge? What's big?
So I suppose I think of big stuff as being like larger than two people can live together.
I would say larger than one person.
Oh dear.
Than one person's capability to pick up.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's manual handling person's weightlifting capabilities?
Oh, is there something like 20?
25 kilograms, something like that.
25?
Wait. Is this like how much we can lift as human beings or what?
Or
how much it's
by Health and
advisable.
Safety Act to be able to lift.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So,
I think I have had some manual handling training at some point, but it wasn't that specific. I mean, I think I struggle with 15, to be honest, because I'm not that strong. I think I'm stubborn, not strong. And those aren't good manual handling things.
Like, it tends to be along the lines of science and industry and
okay, yeah.
that kind of, yeah.
Okay, because I'm trying to envisage what kind of oversized collections actually are. For me, I would think, obviously, like industrial bits and bobs, like bits of equipment and that sort of thing. Like, but then we've also got the equipment side where it's like actual scientific equipment and bits of the first computer, which is huge, and like
yeah, things like
you
Pegasus engine. But then you also have where you have vehicles, aircraft.
Yeah, I was going to say
transport section of that.
Section,
yeah.
Shall we get you, Simon, to talk about your experience and what led you to the Science Museum Group at Wroughton?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself a large objects conservator. I kind of just fell into that for my own natural interests. So previously, before conservation, I was tinker with bikes and cars quite a lot. And in Cardiff, my internship was based in Imperial War Museums, where I helped with the large object decants for the transformation.
Very nice.
Yeah, so that really probably piqued my interests in the conservation of large objects then. And shortly after that internship, I randomly met a fella in a pub who had a museum. Well, he just overheard my Imperial War Museum chat to some other conservators, and he approached me and said, I've got a tank museum. So I went off.
Casual.
Yeah. And would I like to help with him? So it was mainly large objects and working objects there.
I mean, we're talking actual tanks.
Yeah, actual tanks.
Nice.
And it was more of a private collection.
Sure,
rather than a museum, but he had school days there.
Oh.
So I worked there for a couple of years till I finished my degree, and then I went up to National Museum of Scotland's Museum of Flight. I worked there for a few years.
Ooh, shiny.
And that things got really big then. So we're talking Concorde, Vulcan bombers. From there onwards, I've started working from the Science Museum back in 2016.
Nice.
And just kind of been more interested in the larger objects of things and the difficulties they kind of pose.
Yeah.
For conservation and logistics.
Objects conservation scaled up massively.
Yeah.
But you've also got experience as a mechanic, haven't you? Which you started off with, and that's an area of the discussion I'd like to get into a bit later. That the other skills that are required, or the other things that you need to be aware of, that isn't just conservation.
Yeah, I did. I was a bit of an amateur mechanic, and it certainly has helped. I do like tinkering with objects, so I've got no qualms in sort of taking apart, and that's why where I'm working at the moment is great, because it's industrial machinery and science collections. So there's quite a lot of fettling and taking things apart for treatment and stuff like that. So I love
that, because that sounds terrifying from my point of view, whereas if I'm forced to take anything apart, I'm always living in fear of not being able to put it back together. That is just one of my innate fears of shit.
Oh, yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, I'm the same. So I've also worked at, as you know, the Science and Industry Museum. So I've got various experience with working with large objects, but I would never have had the confidence to take something apart. I got to the point of being able to identify the different parts of various mechanical and industrial bits of machinery, and the kind of things like oil reservoirs and stuff like that. The things that you see that you don't necessarily know how to identify if you're not familiar with the stuff. But I wouldn't have taken it apart.
I suppose I'm fortunate I had the ability to, when I was growing up with my cars, just to go, there's something slightly wrong with the engine, and I would, half a day later, it'd be in bits on the floor and go, I have to get it back together again. So
I suppose it's a lifetime of practice in some ways.
Yeah. So I would then just figure out a way how to do it. But I love documenting and trying to figure out how things go back together. And it really does help with. So
for some of these things, I guess that you might actually have really good documentation to begin with, because if these things were constructed in the modern era, they might have blueprints and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Absolutely vital. With most of our objects have technical files.
Oh, thank God for that.
Which I delve into quite a lot. And if I need to get into an object, I will request that and see how it comes apart.
Yeah, amazing.
But they are large objects, so I wouldn't necessarily always be able to afford the time to be able to take it all apart and things like that. Yeah, of course. So see what significance is of if it's going on display, was it form or function, what I would like to preserve in that respect. So I would. You have to do that with large objects, I think, because some of them I couldn't spend 400 hours on one thing. I just simply don't have the time.
Yeah, no, sure.
So, but I I have done it in the past where I have been able to, like up in Museum of Flight, I've been preparing aircraft there. And I think it was up to 500 hours I was spent on paint consolidation of about 5 aircraft.
So, wow.
Yeah. I was in preparation for them to come out of the hangars and go into temporary storage. They needed to be able to be moved, so without any further loss of paint.
Wow.
And then also withstand uncontrolled environmental conditions for a period of a few months. So it was 500 hours upside down underneath an airplane.
Oh my God.
Injecting.
Wow. Straps to it then.
No, just had a little platform. I could go up and down on.
Amazing.
So injecting.
I mean, I'm afraid of heights, so that's not a great start to any of this, right? Like, I'm not happy if I have to go up on scaffolding at all.
So another thing with large objects is you might have to go up some, up to the height of them. So
that's fair enough, really. But how often would you say that you kind of need to conserve the inside mechanical bits that aren't necessarily being seen for something to go on display, for example? Because if it's part of what you're trying to preserve, but it might not be something that's seen to the public, like, how often is that a really important bit? Just out of curiosity.
It does depend on if it came into the museum still working or still mechanically moving. I would definitely try to preserve that as much as possible, even if it's just a static display. When you strip down an object, find out it could easily be put back into working condition. I wouldn't want to just move it into on display and let that then corrode. So it doesn't take priority. So I say
do what you can.
Yeah. And that is kind of what our remit is with displays and things like that. So, I don't spend too much time. But say if it was a vehicle that's come in, a recently acquisitioned vehicle, I would go through all hazard checks, and then procedure would be to drain oils, replace them with sort of...
What are your hazard checks like?
Hazard checks, very thorough when it comes to particularly transport. I would have a form, basically. I would go through that and start off with, talk about an aircraft, then it would be the dates that it would be manufactured, and then see whether there's asbestos. If it was military, it might still have asbestos in it. Check for radioactive components.
Tasty.
Yeah. And sort of pressurized gases, hydraulics, corrosive fluids, explosives. Yeah, there's an endless list.
The list goes on.
I don't want to even look at.
Oh God.
There's things I probably would have missed, but yeah.
Oh God.
When I'm going through it, and then depending on what I've flagged from there, usually getting in a specialist, especially when it comes to explosives. So sort of ejection seats and canopies.
Yeah, of course.
And then so
because in my head I was thinking, what could possibly be explosive? Oh, I see. Yeah, because you need to detonate that. Oh yeah, of course.
Airliners will have the oxygen tanks in, which
of course.
drop down from above. Those have to be removed and degassed. So it's
love it.
That's something interesting about industrial, scientific and transport collections that aren't necessarily just about large objects, but are so much more commonly found in large objects. That of course you've got your object, and every part of the object is a valuable and important original component of the object, but also there's some things that could literally kill you just by accident.
The inherent nature of it being a large object, its weight, its weight distribution, whether it's still stable structurally, intact. It's
so by nature your intervention has to be significantly more interventive than just I have this lacquered box kind of thing. I am cleaning it and putting it in store. You've got to take bits away from it and replace oils and structurally support areas that could snap off and kill someone.
Yeah, that then would fall into what the object's intention is.
Yeah.
So if it was to go on display or if it was to go on to be used as a working object. Again, which large objects are usually considered good candidates for. Then you would have to comply with modern health and safety laws and general health and safety for your own sake as well. And the Science Museum have really good hazard and collections training, which
really makes sense.
They really do. Does that change your attitude if you've got objects that used to be working and so have been treated and maintained as in replacement bits? Does that change your attitude to the conservation of the object, or do you just take it as I'm just maintaining this in the same way even though some of the bits aren't original?
Well, if the object has been used and has been like a working object which throughout its life, or a working thing throughout its life, and those modifications have occurred through its life, I would preserve those. I wouldn't. When it comes to that kind of stuff, I would rather do minimal intervention. And preserve the fabric of how the object is existing.
Do you keep a lot of spares and stuff like that? It sounds like an insane question, but it's one that I asked once when we went to the Fleet Air Arm Museum, which I think we talked briefly about in the military episode that we did.
I like the Fleet Air Arm Museum.
Oh, it's amazing.
I love David Morris.
Oh, yeah, because they basically had, like, obviously they have loads of planes, and then they also had, like, a whole store full of bits.
Yeah.
And that was very much so that they could replace bits as necessary on the planes.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really interesting that they had kind of not a leftover section, but a bits section where it's just like almost like a hardware store where you can go and
find
get the appropriate material for that plane.
Yeah, like you would have in a mechanics.
Yeah, exactly. It was very practical like that, and like I was just kind of curious, like what your stance on it is. I mean, I don't think either one is wrong or anything. It was more of a I'm curious what you guys do.
Mainly working on static objects.
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't replace. I don't have a parts store, unfortunately. That would be amazing. That I could go and get bits and pieces from. If I do need to kind of replace parts for structural reasons and that, then I would always try and use the originals. So aircraft components, bolts and things. I would go through an aircraft company and replace it with the necessary bolt. I would label those new parts as new replacement parts, stamp that into it so you can always tell. There are kind of with new advancements in 3D printing now, you can actually, I've seen a Porsche, vintage Porsche dealership 3D printing out of stock parts for old Yeah, I mean, I thought if I wasn't able to find a part, or
that means there could be a way for you to kind of have it manufactured. That's so interesting.
Yeah, so they would kind of manufacture it. I think it's a plastic, metal, carbon fiber material.
Cool. And is that something that could run? It could work.
Yeah, it's structurally stable. So if you had to replace a structural part with it, it would.
Nice.
So, and it would be 3D printed exactly to the original specifications. So just like an OEM part, which would be
that's really cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Is that something that you think could be like bought into the conservation fill arena?
I think so. Yeah.
Is it expensive?
I mean, it can be cheap.
Yeah.
As soon as Porsche start getting involved.
Yeah.
And also, like, that's a really specialist thing to do because it's not something you can mass produce because it's a one-off that you need.
That's true.
You know, there's a lot. So much like conservation should cost because it's very specialist. I guess that should cost because it's very specialist, if you think about it.
Yeah, that's true.
It might annoy quite a few people in the fact that might actually be taking sort of older traditional skills out of the loop. If fabrication of certain parts.
That's a good point as well. Yeah, that is a good point.
Might have a mixture of the both.
Well, yeah, quite. Quite. I suppose one of the things at Fleet Air Arm Museum, by the way, was that they had a lot of engineers that they then retrained to kind of have more of a conservation mentality as they worked on the planes, which I thought was a really excellent concept as a kind of way of keeping those skills in the profession, I suppose, or like in welcoming those skills into the profession. But it has a slightly different. It has to have a different approach when it's a large object or a vehicle or something, because just like you say, it needs to be structurally safe and all that stuff. And it's an interesting thing that I talked to someone I know who does a lot of like sculpture and statues and architectural bits and bobs on buildings and that sort of thing. Again, a lot of scaffolding, and high-vis vests.
Yes.
Lots of risk assessments. But she does a lot of stuff that's really, really hardcore. She does say that you do need something that's so much more hardcore than what you would normally introduce to say, if you had a ceramic object, you would never put like this sort of epoxy on it. But because it's something that needs to be so structural and needs to be safe for the public and all that stuff, it is what you use. Like, it might not be super reversible, and it might be that it blends in really well, so it might be that it looks really restored as opposed to conserved. But like, it's just what you've got to do to make it safe. And I thought those were really interesting kind of dilemmas that like I don't necessarily have in my working practice, but is really interesting to hear about as people who work on much huger things.
Well, my go-to stuff can usually be more proprietary brands of sort of corrosion inhibitors and coating systems, simply because of the nature of the object, if it's going outside or what kind of conditions it's going to be in. Something where like Paraloid B72 is just not going to cut it. So,
what do you use then? What are your conservation materials?
For example, if it needs to be structural, so my epoxies are epoxy putty.
Right.
So, and I still go for Araldite 2020. You got corrosion inhibitors and rust converters. Those are always in stock. I'm doing several tests at the moment to see if what corrosion inhibitors would work best. What has an element of reversibility to them.
Oh, okay.
Because quite a lot of stuff is like a thick, waxy coating. To be like wax lacquer, which looks nasty.
So something that essentially prevents
any further corrosion.
Stuff.
Just trying to stop that corrosion cell at the beginning. So I have found a few, and I'm just got a few coupons dotted around the hangers, and I'll continue to monitor them for a while and see.
That sounds exciting.
Can I jump back to something we mentioned just now? Large objects on display. I spoke to Jim White, who is an object mounting and installation specialist at the Imperial War Museums. I really wanted to get him to... He did say yes to an interview, but I've not been able to get in touch with him, unfortunately. And he did... So I met him at the Make It Float day of talks in Norwich in September, and his paper was amazing because he was basically talking about how to mount large aircraft. And when you go into the Imperial War Museums and there's all the planes above you, that essentially he did that.
Cool.
And there are a number of different things that totally amazed me, like the fact that there's no kind of governmental regulations on the mounting of large objects in museums, so like there's nothing. It's totally insane. Like weight regulations or checking regulations or anything like that.
Oh, interesting.
So obviously the
I mean, I liked my brain went two ways with that. One way was, why would the government care? And the second one was, wait, people are walking underneath it.
Yeah, exactly.
So immediately I was conflicted.
Exactly. So yeah, he was talking about basically what IWM does in order to ensure that the objects and the people are safe, and there's a lot of building checks and object checks, and you know, the lines between the building and the object that's keeping it up, those are checked as well, and it's really very thorough and
that's cool.
rigorous.
I mean, that's good. That pleases me.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's
I mean, imagine
really
you'd
good.
have to have some mechanical or structural engineers to assess things about the aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, I can totally see it
Yeah.
like being taken into account to like new builds and stuff. Like if you know that you're going to put large things up on the walls, for example, or hanging from the ceiling. I'm thinking of there was an amazing article in Icon News recently, which was about these giant figureheads of ships, and they were all going to be mounted in this big hall. Yeah, but obviously that's a new building being prepared for this, so like it's all being taken into account. It must be such a different ballpark to take a building that's already built and go, look, we're gonna put a tank here. Why not? Whilst really cool, also just terrifying.
Loading and stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that really struck me when I was working in the Science and Industry Museum. We were decanting a very great number of really, really varied objects. And we were working with museum object and art handling specialists, Martin Speed, and their lifting contractor, which was Jay Mackenzie from Salisbury.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Yeah, have you worked with him?
Yeah.
He's great. I really enjoyed working with him. And it was the way that they thought about objects and lifting objects was amazing, and just the kind of the huge scale that you're looking at there. We moved an object that was 6 tons. I mean, if you've never moved large objects before, this will sound totally alien, but the huge crane. Yes, the crane that we got it out of the building with also weighed it at the same time.
That's crazy cool.
He was looking at the object going, I just don't know where it's keeping the weight. Where is the weight? How is this 6 tons? But it was, and it's, you know, that's the kind of
that's weird.
The provision that you do they were picking up an object when they don't know the weight of it. It's insane, because you've got to allow for.
I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, they do pose a huge logistical nightmare challenge.
But also, like, coming at it from like somewhere, having not ever worked anywhere where that's kind of something that's done regularly, that kind of means that it's just so big and terrifying and unknown that it's just so strange to me to think that you can even pick that up. Like, how? What do people do?
Yeah, sometimes you've got to take a leaf out of the industrial side of things, and then also try and think a bit out of the box. When I was in Museum of Flight, we were installing all the aircraft back into the refurbished hangars, and what had been where they decided to put all the aircraft was based on a 1/32 scale drawing of the hangar, and then the curators dropping little 1/32 scale models of the aircraft into their little.
First of all, that's adorable.
I mean, it looked amazing. But then, logistically, installing them into the positions that they had put them in.
Oh no,
that's a bit of a different beast.
As you've only got like 3 points of turning circle, and we're pushing it with tractors.
Yeah,
we had to think of how we're going to slide this 2 meters to the side and put the nose out. We actually had drilled holes into the new floor to put mounting brackets. And then we rolled the wheels onto 2 Teflon sheets and used turfers, so big ratchets, to then slide it sort of sideways.
Oh my God.
And then get them off the Teflon. So it was a head scratching moment to begin with, but then because it was so easy to move, then we it needs to go another 4 millimeters this way. So it was actually quite a good system. So I recommend that to anyone who's moving large stuff. It needs to go sideways. Teflon is your friend.
Teflon is your friend. You heard it here first, folks. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's the inventiveness of object movement that I really enjoyed when I was working with large objects, and just using the situation around you, and the lifting equipment itself is really interesting. Like car jacks, and it just goes. It's all extremely heavy, isn't it? Actually, you're doing large object lifting, and most of the time I couldn't even lift the equipment that was used for lifting the large objects.
Yeah. I'm a fan of not really lifting anything. I'll get the machines to do it.
I mean, that's fair enough.
Very lazy.
Step one of object handling, though.
Yeah.
Mechanise
everything.
Yeah. Weight distribution's fascinating as well, isn't it? Because you can have hidden weight loading.
Yeah. Doing always test lifting where we're moving stuff with the forklifts.
Yeah.
And that's always a scary moment, even if it's only an inch off the floor.
Right.
Where is that weight distribution? Because it's not
crazy.
It's not like a big pallet of beans where centre. It could be right at the top, over to the side, overhanging. Yeah.
Have you ever got it wrong and dropped something?
I haven't. No, I've never dropped anything. No.
Simon's looking smug.
Yeah.
I've dropped something. Yeah. Okay. We were lifting a large lathe, and even now we're not entirely sure what happened. We were lifting it on a forklift. It was stable. It was test lifted. It was... By some foresight, I thought, I'm not happy with this just going as it was, and I strapped it to the equipment and made sure there was nothing that could, it couldn't fall off, even though it looked like it wouldn't go anywhere. We lifted. It moved the length of a whole extremely long store, totally fine. We needed to put it down in order to safely do something else. Lifted it, immediately it fell off. And there was no change whatsoever with anything that we did. It fell off. Obviously, it didn't fall off because we'd strapped it safely.
I was going to say, but it's strapped.
And we were all safe distances away and following all of the safety procedures. But it just went, and that was a case of a new, very heavy motor being strapped to the top, being attached rather to the top of the object.
Okay, its centre of gravity.
Which changed its centre of gravity. But what we didn't understand was how that had changed? How did it suddenly seem to be top heavy when before it just wasn't? So I think the lesson I took out of that was, number one, always take extra precautions. Even if you think that it won't go anywhere at all.
Extra straps.
And stay back. And I say wear your steel toe cap boots as if steel toe cap boots would have done anything if something that size had fallen on you. And also the solution that we found to that, when it got to the point where we didn't feel that we could lift it safely, we got the lifting contractor in to come and move it for us, and they did it in half an hour.
It's terrifying when you do have to lift something of that sheer size, and it can be a heart in your mouth moment. So
I'd like to reference quickly a talk that we saw at Icon 19 by Eleanor Schofield, and she managed the movement of lifting various huge parts of the Mary Rose into position, and her talk was essentially how to lift the ridiculously giant, I don't even remember which part of the boat it was, but it was one of the huge pieces.
Was that the one which said you had to give it a little push at the end?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And the entire hole just went...
Yeah.
Because conservatives.
Because conservatives. And one of the things saying, I wished I'd just cut it in half, because it got to the point where she was worried about people. Life and limb. And that's one of the interesting things about moving large objects, isn't it? That yes, of course, the object is important, but actually, we just want to make sure the people are safe.
We were talking about mounting things and how cool that is. And something I really enjoyed was Nigel Larkin, who is a natural history conservator. Did a talk about mounting a big whale skeleton, I want to say, like a huge thing, and working with the people who could actually weld something that could actually hold this and suspend it beautifully in a museum setting, which was just an amazing talk. And if I can find a link to that, I will also link to that, because that was a really cool talk. So unsurprisingly, even skeletons, especially dinosaurs and stuff like that, right, are also huge things that need mounting, and and also Dippy's going on tour, obviously. So
Dippy. I've realised that there is a lot of large stuff that isn't furniture, paintings, and industry music stuff.
Source natural history people.
We didn't forget you. So when you're lifting large things, regardless of whether it's dinosaurs or large engines, sometimes you need help, as we've talked about before.
Yeah.
What kind of help is available? Obviously, shout out to Jimmy McKenzie and Martin Speed, who we've already mentioned.
Most recently, we've had a few vehicle exhibitions or loans going out. So the 1888 Benz has gone to the V&A, and I was really impressed by the transport they sent. So it was Cars Europe. They have a truck that the whole back slides off, so it allows you to take in a vehicle completely flat, so there's no ramps, there's no winches, so there's no pressure points on it. It's and then it lifts it, you strap it all down, then it lifts it onto the
so it kind of lifts like a tray.
Like
oh
a
my
tray,
god, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that. So
wow.
Yeah, just there specifically for sort of supercars and things which don't have any towing points on them.
Yeah, of course.
Which you can drag up a large ramp.
Oh, I didn't even imagine that they wouldn't have towing points. Is that too practical for a supercar?
I mean,
too ugly.
I suppose in theory you could drive it on, but then if it's not in a drivable condition, then
for the driverless exhibition we had the Citroen DS, which went on display. And when it's working, the hydroelastic suspension pumps all the suspension components up, so it raises it off the ground.
Oh, but of course,
as it's not a working object, it's on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
So
what?
Yeah, it's about 70 mil off the floor. Then we couldn't use ramps, so we then had to use a specialist wheel clamps, which then connect to a crane, and then you precariously lift it off into.
Wow.
you get specialists, but it was just learning curves. You always overcome these challenges somehow. It has to be done.
I was really amazed, and I continue to be amazed, how many large objects have been built into museum and gallery spaces. That they obviously, it was a great idea at the time that yes, we want to have this like part of electrical plant in your gallery, and so why not helicopter it in?
And now it's there forever,
and then build on top of it. And there's an example I'm thinking of, and the options were essentially how to remove this. The options were cut it up and take it out in pieces, or leave it there forever. And that's it's insane that we've it's insane.
Ambitious but insane, and maybe not the best forward thinking ever. Maybe
we have examples of that with good intentions, where we've brought in aircraft into the hangars, and they've been in there for decades. And now the hangar doors don't open.
Oh no!
So you'd have to take a wall off.
Yeah.
Can the doors be repaired, or would this be a case of somehow get the doors open, then move everything all at once?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which hangar is that?
D3.
Okay.
If you know Wroughton.
Nice.
Well, we will all know Wroughton soon.
Oh, yes.
Because we have a special tour from something that we recorded a couple of weeks ago. Hi, Simon.
Hello, Chloe.
Where are we?
We're at the Science Museum in Wroughton, otherwise known as the National Collection Centre now.
That's a new name for it, isn't it?
Yeah, or NCC for short.
And what's this fancy car we've just got into?
This is a hydrogen-powered car. Which will be going around sighting today.
It's got some big stickers on it, Science Museum Group stickers on it.
Yeah, we'll stick it up.
So Simon has very kindly agreed to give us a tour of the Science Museum Group at Wroughton storage site, which is their large object store and soon to be the one collection storage facility for the Science Museum Group. And it's made up of lots of different buildings and lots of different spaces, and the stats and stuff we can ask Simon for later. But we'll be driving around in this fancy posh car, which emits only water, and it's a lovely rainy day for it.
Yep, welcome to Wroughton. There we go.
So we're driving along airfield, and we've just passed loads of sheep in a field, and now we're driving between two fields of solar panels, is that right?
Yeah, it's one of the largest solar parks in the UK.
It is huge, it's honestly huge. So it's in the middle of this sort of quite flat landscape for people who don't know the area, with big undulating hills and stuff. Is it a road or is it a landing strip?
This is a landing strip, and it's actually a mile from the bottom to the top here. So,
and there's like signs saying "Be careful of prancing deer" and that kind of thing.
yeah, it's a bit of a wildlife sanctuary as well. We have deer here. There's lots of hares, pheasants, the odd seagull.
There's a crow over there. And then the buildings look, so we've just passed 2 buildings, and they look different ages. One of them is covered in polythene, it looks like.
That's the old control tower.
Ah, so it's a historic site, isn't it? And it's got the kind of the remains of the infrastructure still there.
Yeah, it's 1940s. It was built for the RAF. So and they've owned it up until 1979 when the Science Museum took over.
We're still driving next to the solar panel field, if that gives you some perspective of how large it is. And we're now approaching a collection of buildings, which is this what you're calling engineering?
Yep, so we have the engineering building here, which is where our labs are currently. And again, it's an old RAF workshop for vehicles, so makes a quite good lab for large objects.
Is it normally more windy than this?
Oh yeah. There's the Bath University's Hive project, so materials testing. That building there's where they used to hang the silk parachutes to dry.
So it's quite nice. We were walking through grassy gardens, really, isn't it? There's roads, there's driveways and roads and stuff, but there's also hedges and trees and little fences and stuff. Going through a adorable gate.
That's where I have large objects lab, we have a small objects lab and a paper lab and analysis room.
So we've just gone into the engineering building through a side door, and Simon's gone to turn off the alarm system, and it's a huge space.
So yeah, this is about 9 metres wide by 26 metres wide length. So we have a 1-ton gantry crane that runs the whole length.
Think hangar warehouse if you're not familiar with this kind of building. And next to me there's a large metal rod attached to the gantry with straps. So think padded straps.
and that's an X-ray machine. So our gantry crane does come in quite handy. I don't know the full weight of it yet, but the weighing beams are there to weigh it.
Or can we do that now?
Yeah, we can do that now. Yeah.
So Simon, you've got a page of stats and interesting facts about the site. What information do you have for us about the site?
Well, it was built by the RAF in 1940 as an airfield or maintenance airfield. So it's 545 acres.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's very large. Yeah, with 3 runways. So the one that we just drove down was a mile long. And
there's 3 of them?
Yeah, there's 3. There's 7 hangars. So SMG took over the site in 1979. And we've been storing the largest of the objects of the Science Museum Group's collections since then. And we also have the library and archives on site as well.
Of the whole of the Science Museum Group?
Yep, so we have 35,000 3D objects, considered medium to large objects, and there's 500,000 2D objects, so paintings, library and archives. I'll correct myself there. We have 9 aircraft hangars.
I love that you have to keep track of all the buildings that you have to work in. That's crazy.
2 of them one of them's not in use at the moment.
Right.
One of them's actually hired out for other museums to store objects in.
Which other museums are there?
Museum of London.
Oh, cool. Okay.
The 9th building is an all-purpose built store, which was built in 1994. That's environmentally controlled.
Oh my God. So he's just unhooked some massive chains for this gantry.
Do you mind holding
Oh, God.
a chain?
No, it's fine. Yeah. What do I have to do?
Just hold that there.
Just hold it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's coming off the ground and it's perfectly balanced.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
That took me some time getting that the weight distribution. That's it. Yeah. Could you hold that chain as well?
Got it. So think huge yellow beams and lots of cogs and wheels and heavy chains and essentially a large metal tube with some green padded straps on it, which are dangling it basically. And what we're doing is identifying how heavy it is.
Yeah, here we have some industrial weighing beams. So these will weigh up to 2 tons.
What?
Yeah, so those are the kind of general sizes we're dealing with here.
So we're releasing the weight now onto the weighing scales.
That's the weight off that now. That's 191 kilograms. So here we have our small objects lab. So we do have some small objects. You can pick them up and put them on the table.
So we're standing, it's a large space with an opening in the middle, and there's sort of workshop equipment around the side, an air abrasive machine. There's a huge thing covered in Tyvek.
We have the Nederman extraction, fume extraction arms, so in both sides of the lab, and smaller portable ones if we're working anywhere else.
Off we go. Where are we going now?
We'll go past D2, which is where we have the library and archives, our hempcrete store, and the giant walk-in freezer.
Oh my God. Roller shutter doors.
Just the alarm off. Just wet.
Wow!
You can hear the big walk-in freezer humming away there.
And that's the freezer. Wow!
Some objects currently waiting to go in there.
So they're polythene wrapped carriages, aren't they?
Here outside the freezer, yeah, these have been pest treated already. They've been frozen.
So we're in a massive hangar, and there's some like big white marquee tents to our left-hand side. A goods lift ahead of us, and on our right-hand side we've got polythene wrapped objects, and is that a shipping container? Is that the freezer?
That's the freezer, yeah. It's a large shipping container. And half of the hangar is given over to the library and archives. So there's a huge
brilliant
space in there. The hangar is about 400 metres square, so yeah, it's 200 metres square library.
Wow.
And archives.
What's in the tent?
Buffer zones.
Buffer zones. I'm peeking in. It's just a big empty tent.
Oh, it's empty at the moment, yeah. So we have
What's normally in there?
objects that come in, so new acquisitions, objects waiting to go out, large objects.
They're big marquees.
So we just drove about 1.6 miles to the other side of the site, to D4. So this is where we have our aircraft.
Oh, wow. So D4 is the large object store. Yes. Is that right? And it's a big hangar again. It's crazy driving up and then parking up next to the tiny person-sized door that sits like in the middle of this mass expansive wall of your store. So we're going into the sort of human entrance, aren't we? Oh my God.
In you go.
Oh my God. It's huge!
So that's a Lockheed Super Constellation.
The big plane?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the least in the know about aircraft. So describe what we're seeing, Simon.
So we have right in front of you, you have the Constellation. So this was...
It's a plane.
It's an aircraft, yeah. So this was the Rolling Stones Pacific tour bus in the 1970s.
What?
And then there's larger aircraft dotted around it, but dwarfed by the Constellation, DC-3, de Havilland Dove, and multiple vehicles. So we have racks full of push bikes, racks full of motorcycles, and freestanding cars, engines. So yeah, they all look quite small in here, but
They do.
but they are big. And we're going to walk around.
Yeah. So yeah, to our left is the rack of bicycles of different ages, strapped to pallets. Some buses. Is that a fire engine?
Yeah, there's a Dennis fire engine, a telephone box, TV detection van.
Oh my god. Now we're walking under a plane wing. Cash.
Under the Constellation wing. In front we have the de Havilland Dragon and the de Havilland Dragon Rapide.
Another plane.
Yeah, it's nice.
So we're standing now roughly in the middle, I suppose, of this gigantic space.
Yep.
And I'm forgetting to realise how big it is. And then there's just another aircraft that barely takes up any of the space that you've got available to you.
Large traction engine, the Empress of India. We have 2 rows of cars here. So one of my favourite parts of the museum is a rack 12 metres high full of motorcycles.
How do you get these up there?
So at the end we have our reach truck, a 1.5 ton truck with which can go right up to the 12 metre, plug them off the top. So yeah, we're all trained on forklift trucks here. So it's the only way we can get around, basically storing the objects and retrieving them.
Yeah. So Simon's just opened the door of a vehicle to check the moth trap that's sitting inside it. Do you tend to get moth infestations in your vehicles?
Not generally. We've been quite good for a while, but it's good to keep on top of the ones in here because there's been an uncontrolled environmental space, gaps in the old hangar doors and things like that.
So we're just driving from D4, the large objects store, and we're driving past Building 1, which is huge. It is absolutely huge. That's going to be the small objects store and new lab space and stuff.
80% of the collection is going to be, the Science Museum Group's collection will be stored in there.
Wow.
So, small to large objects.
And we're going to have a look at it when we get upstairs in this other building that we're sitting outside of. A1?
Yeah, so this is A1. This is built in 1994, so this is our environmentally controlled building. All the other hangars are, as you imagine, non-environmentally controlled at all.
Drafty.
Yeah, drafty. Yeah, have between 80 and 100% relative humidity with fluctuations mirroring that of the external conditions here in Wroughton. So yeah, this is split. We have all the ground floor for our medium to large objects, and upstairs we have some welfare facilities and our textiles store.
So this building is more of a sort of set of rooms, isn't it? Though this is a huge, huge room, it's actually quite small in comparison to what we've just been in.
This is the outer loading bay. Works as an airlock system to the inner loading bay. So you can't open the both doors at the same time. Either side of the building we have A1, which is our mobile racking for the medium-sized objects on small pallets. The other side is A2, confusingly called. In A1 we have A1, A2 and A3.
Oh, great. Well, that clears that up.
Yeah. So in the A2 store we have our custom-built large pallets, so they're up to 2 tons.
Oh my god, wow.
So it's racked to the full height of the building, 12 metres. It is a system that allows us to gain twice as much object space as a normal static rack, as each rack is a mobile unit, which has its good and bad points.
So I'll just describe what happened there. A roller shutter went up and the lights went on, and we are now standing in front of the most compressed large object storage I have ever seen. If you imagine like the kind of roller racking that many of us will be familiar with in libraries and archives and stuff, this is huge, and everything is on pallets, and it's so compressed and so efficient. This is such an efficient way of storing.
So yeah, it's great if you can double your space. Like I said, it does have its drawbacks. You'll need a very narrow aisle forklift truck to access the objects.
Right.
As in other mobile racking units, annual inspections, so it is quite costly. Doubling the space here wasn't really necessary for the Science Museum. We're not short on space. So it's been a good learning curve for this.
Right.
So, but yeah, like the other buildings, the racking has an end of life. That's why we're starting to explore
Right,
methods,
I see.
storing, hence building one.
I'm looking at this thinking, this is storage goals, but so much work and expense has gone into this, hasn't
very
it?
Expensive method of racking. I'll open up one of the
Yes, please.
aisles. So these are kind of medium-sized objects. Fridge freezers, cookers, aero engines, huge computers. We'll have a look down the row.
It's amazing!
You can see the amount of engineering that goes into a rack like this. There we go.
Wow.
Now we can enter.
So this giant compressed cube of museum objects just parted for us like the Red Sea. And when it stopped, it just stopped. Nothing moved. There was maybe the tiniest bit of wobble, but everything on here is
very stable.
so stable. And which is just as well, considering that what do you think is the heaviest, or what's the weight range, do you think, of objects that are on here?
Well, the pallets will take up to a ton, but the racks themselves, they're 13 tons.
Can we walk down?
Yeah.
What?
If there's anything interesting.
Wow.
Or aero engines.
Everything is interesting. And a fridge freezer. I'm looking out for things that I might have put on pallets. So we're still walking. Still walking.
Machines. Dentist's chair.
Ooh. And we've just about got to the end. Wow.
Should we have a look at the forklift?
What are we going to do on the forklift?
We'll take an object off the rack.
How exciting.
So there's a different type of forklift we have here for this particular racking, because it's a very narrow aisle. So again, another cost to it because it requires a different license.
Right. Oh, right.
To the normal forklifts, the reach trucks we have on site. The whole cab goes up as well, so it allows you to more easily access the top of the rack.
And see what you're doing as well. Simon has climbed into the driver's seat. I'm not allowed because you need training.
I need to take an object off the rack for a loan, so I'll get it out now.
Oh wow, so it pivot. The wheels are, I don't know what to call them officially, but it means you can essentially spin on the spot. So he's just backed it into the right position, and now he's backing down the aisle in this sort of very narrow kind of vehicle with a huge tower on it and forks, and I'm staying a safe distance back. Imagine heavy lifting equipment and flashing orange lights. He's up! He's going up! So as you can imagine, your object locations have to be really thorough, because otherwise you've got to be at 12 metres high and trying to search for your object. Object acquired! This is perfect for audio, as I'm sure you'll agree. That was done with the absolute minimum of fuss.
Got my object down. I'll condition report that next week.
So how long did it take you to feel comfortable with this? And is this kind of normal equipment for warehouse use?
Yeah, you'll find the narrow aisle trucks and the pickers in Amazon warehouses and Tesco's. It took me about, say, 3-4 months to get fully comfortable. Yeah. We're not taking objects off here at rapid paces like they do in Amazon. We do take our absolute most time. We'll go upstairs to the textile store, but we can get a good vantage point from there to see building one.
Brilliant! Oh, so there's a little cosy little kitchen up here in this building. Oh, it's a tiny room by comparison, but huge also. Oh, lovely. Think aisles and aisles of hung costume covered. Oh, wow, and sealed bags of asbestos warning. What is asbestos in the garment?
There'll be a firefighter's uniform.
Ah.
So, sealed and bagged.
Oh, and rolled textiles. What's down here? Oh, timetables and diagrams and stuff. Bits of embroidery, but huge variety, isn't it?
Yeah, or your area of expertise. Big lumpy bits of metal. That's mine. Don't get to come up here very often. A view of building 1 from the doorway here.
Wow.
Science Museum Group, home of collections. So that'll be 80% of the collection stored in there. 91 metres wide, 289 metres long. So that gives us a square meterage of 26,000 metres squared with a 9,000 metre squared mezzanine.
Wow.
So this is where Blythe House will be rehomed. And also other facilities in there will have purpose-built objects lab, paper and textiles lab. I'm quite looking forward to my objects lab. I have a 5-ton gantry crane. So
What?
which will be remote controlled, so no
hefting on chains anymore.
Yeah. In comparison, a really good space over in the engineering building. But again, it's a sort of retrofitted old RAF maintenance building. So this is going to be fantastic. We'll have collections access here for up to about 15,000 visitors a year. So that's public open days, school visits, and we'll continue our collections researchers as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Simon, for showing me round. Yeah. It's amazing. So we're really privileged to have you allow us to come in. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Gary.
Anyway, that sounds like a really amazing place to visit, by the way.
So I actually had an hour and a half of recording time that I had to edit down to 20 minutes.
That is well done.
Alex, you're very lucky to work there. I know it's got its quirks.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
but
I
it's
really do
a really
enjoy it.
fantastic place to work.
Oh, I suppose something else to mention is, we haven't really gone into it, but because we talked about how industrial stuff can sometimes be built into buildings.
Yeah.
But of course, sometimes the building with the industrial stuff in it is actually the collection. If you see what I mean, like working mills and working that sort of thing, like that.
Yeah.
So, I know that's working objects and like, in fact, a whole working setting, which is really cool. But just shout out to the people who run those, because that's a really badass and very, very much full-time job. Well done for keeping those things going and keeping them safe and just doing amazing work. Like, that's so cool when you see that stuff. I live for going to places like that. It's so cool.
Yeah, Croft and Beam engine's good.
Yeah, that's good. So where can people go if they need a bit more guidance and information about working with these things?
There's several guidelines out there. Also, the Big Stuff conference.
Oh, nice.
That's good fun. They have all their papers published online.
Excellent.
So I'll put a link to the
absolutely
to the website on there. There has been the museum and galleries larger objects.
Oh yeah,
conservation guidelines
from the 90s, right? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
They're quite old now. Recently, been the Association of British Transport and Engineering's museums have brought out an updated guideline, which is going to be more of a live document. So they're going to be putting in case studies. I think that's available online as well.
Oh, good.
As a free download, or you can buy the book. Yeah, there's some really good information in there. And there's a really good book by David Morris as well. I recommend everyone read Time Capsule Fighter.
Oh yeah.
So that's about his the conservation of the Vought Corsair at the Fleet Air Arm Museum.
Right, so we've talked about loads of different types of big objects. We talked about sculpture and obviously science and industry and also vehicles, including military ones. And then we did think of fossils in the end, which is great. And agricultural things.
Agriculture, which,
Yeah, so actually we did span quite a few things there, which is great. And the architectural bits. Something we didn't talk about was monuments and sites, which is also a type of large heritage that people do look after.
Yeah.
But that tends to be much more kind of looking after the landscape around the monuments and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like, same with working with buildings, it can be about things like stopping erosion and all that stuff. And there was a talk that I went to recently at the Museums Association exhibition bit, which was about a building in Scotland which they're trying to look after, and they're essentially building a kind of a cube around to stop it decaying.
The Macintosh.
That's correct.
That's going to entirely... Yeah, I have opinions about that.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you do. I can tell. I can absolutely tell. Ashley, do you want to get into it?
I feel like the conservation of buildings is a whole episode topic on its own.
It absolutely is.
But why would you change the entire vista? Like, why? I know it's deteriorating. I get it. But why? Why? It's like,
I know, and this is the kind of discussions that people are having, especially when it's like big ancient monuments, that sort of thing, because they have the same kind of issues. And this was especially something that I looked at years ago in Malta, for example, where they've had to build basically coastal erosion shelters around old temples and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that it is a way of managing change, sure, but then what are the kind of trade-offs for that and all that stuff, right? So it is super interesting to talk about, and yes, there should totally be an episode on that. But I'm glad you have opinions. So yeah, we didn't really talk that much about monuments and buildings, but then that's kind of a different ballpark as well. But it is very much part of like working with huge things, because kind of massive. But yeah, so I think we've covered quite a few bits there. And thanks very much to Simon for joining us.
No, thank you for having me both. Thanks for the pizza.
Today I'm reviewing The Conservation of Sculpture Parks, edited by Sajita Sunara and Andrew Thorne, published in 2018 by Archetype Publications. This book is a collection of 14 papers presented at the International SPARC, Sculpture Parks, get it, conference in Croatia in 2015, plus a write-up of the roundtable discussion at the event. And it really covers a lot of ground for a publication that doesn't outstay its welcome. Its focus is sometimes more about management and less about intervention, but we'll get into that in a bit. For the material geeks out there, I'm pleased to report that a wide variety of materials are covered: wood, metals, ceramic, stone, concrete, composites, etc., etc. Something I love about this book is that the case studies within comes from a really broad range of places geographically, and thus deals with a variety of climates and challenges. The papers are from Poland, Croatia, Slovenia, Austria, Italy, Spain, Denmark, the UK, Australia and the US. These sculpture parks can be found in urban and rural settings, in forests and deserts, inland and on the coast. And something that delighted me in particular is that it included a cemetery and a more broadly defined landscape park as well, which expanded the scope a little from just carefully curated contemporary art and eccentric artists' indulgences to areas of more monumental nature. Because sculpture parks have been established since around the mid-1900s, most of the sculptures covered in the book are relatively modern, but the challenges are widely applicable to anyone who cares for something that's kept outdoors. Many conservators have at least some sort of lump of outdoor heritage, whether that's public art or some old pieces of industrial equipment or architectural rubble that won't fit in a store. And don't flinch like that, I know it's important rubble. Anyway, back to the content. Some of these papers are a little slim on the conservation details, referring only vaguely to cleaning methods and appropriate materials. And something I found frustrating throughout the chapters was the tendency to keep reiterating that we made the correct decision here, please don't be mad, and sorry we couldn't use something more conservation friendly, we're not able to get that here. Guys, it's okay. I don't know who hurt you, but if you talk me through a decision-making process, I'm not going to be writing angry letters about using epoxy. However, I am pleased to report that the odd paper does give a good level of treatment detail, and there's even a couple of authors in there who are happy to talk about their rigorous material testing. So don't despair. I'd also like to give a tiny high five to the one author who came across as positively feisty and happily waved their "hey, we have to use really hardcore materials because it's outdoors, people" flag, which I really loved. But I shan't name drop them just in case they feel awkward about that. As you might expect, the common problems encountered throughout the book are related to things being displayed outdoors and with no environmental control whatsoever. Aside from your usual problems with corrosion, cracking, warping, insects and the odd spot of vandalism, my favourites include ferocious fungi and willful woodpeckers. Speaking of damage, I quite like that the book covers enough different angles that we get to read about the polar opposite ways of handling touch. Some parks found visitor touch so damaging that they started educating people about the damage being caused, while others view public tactile interaction as the very purpose of the park's existence. I also really liked that the parks can range from not hoity-toity, but very arty and serious, to completely playful, and I really, really enjoyed that. Because of the contemporary nature of these works of art, there's a lot of artist dialogue in this book, and the negotiations between conservators and artists don't always work well. Some do, of course, but there are a lot of questions about the level of intervention, artist intent, choice of materials, and what will happen when the artists are no longer around to be consulted. Some authors sound more exasperated than others, and I had a rueful chuckle at some of the chapters where the conservators clearly felt the artist should have taken material stability into account before creating the artwork, but vision won over intent. Something I took away from this book was that the conservation profession is treated very differently across the world. It's not always conservators carrying out these assessments of the artworks, and some even expressed that they were being undercut by admittedly skilled stonemasons or very much not skilled happy-go-lucky amateurs, which resulted in work being done by the lowest bidder and with very little input from conservation professionals. But I think that's probably a rant for another day. Another thing I really appreciated about this book was how some of the papers addressed difficult topics like political tension and public disapproval. Art stirs up a lot of emotions, and it's not surprising that in countries experiencing a surge in right-wing policies, some sculptures are very much under fire and at risk of removal. This type of disassociation and destruction should be taken just as seriously as wind and water ingress, and as conservators we must do our best to protect heritage for everyone, and not just the powers that be. This paperback has 192 pages, full-colour illustrations, and costs £39.50 from the publisher's website, or around $80 for American customers. If you care for anything that's kept outdoors, I'd definitely give this a read.
Dear Jane, I have a chance to go to Florence, the place where conservation really took off after the 1966 flood. Is there some place where one can see examples of what techniques developed there, what worked, what didn't, and so on? The history of conservation surely ought to be of interest to someone beside me. Dear inquirer who's going to Florence, first may I say how sorry I am how long it's taken me to answer. Of all the C-word inquiries I have ever been given, this has proved to be the most fun, most challenging, and most amount of work to try to get you an answer. But I have recruited the absolute fantastic network of C-word aunties and uncles to help me, as this was well beyond my expertise. So, in that quest, I asked two people to help me, Fiona McAllister and Barbara Cattaneo, and I'm just going to give you a synopsis of the advice that they've given. So Fiona McAllister said that back in 2016 there was a lot of exhibits, so there wasn't a lot of interest. It was the 50th anniversary then, and there was quite a lot of events, not all of which are still available. There was a film by Zeffirelli, and that was shown at the AIC-CAC joint conference in Montreal in 2016, so you might be able to find that film before you go as part of your research. You may have already gone, and I do apologise. But Fiona wasn't aware of any permanent displays in Florence about the impact of the conservation techniques in and of themselves. But there are things like plaques around the city that you could go and see. For example, the ones that show how high the waters were near Duomo. But the other thing that Fiona recommended that was I spoke to Barbara Cattaneo from the Biblioteca Nazionale Centrale di Firenze. Because the National Library really keeps the memory alive of the flood in terms of the way that they plan exercises, do their emergency preparedness planning, have developed and researched treatment techniques, and share that information in the community in which they work. Both Fiona and Barbara recommend that you go and see some of the critical items from the flood, one of which is the Cimabue crucifix. I looked up so many of the words and forgot to look that one up. And that was the one that a lot of people discussed about whether or not the level of conservation was correct or not. That's on display in the Museo di Santa Croce. I have links from all of these things, not that from me, but from my wonderful helpers, which I will pass on to Jenny and Chloe for the show notes. Now, Barbara is also recommending that you visit the National Library, the Opificio della Pietra Dure, which is where she works, and the Gabinetto GP Viesu. The National Library seems to be coming across as the central place. They had more than 100,000 items damaged in the floods. And the National Library then researched lots of different methods for treatment. They looked at ethylene oxide, ETO fumigation, drying techniques, heat, tobacco, things that were used at the tobacco and ceramic factories, such as sawdust and talc. And they evaluated quite a lot of those. They found, in my own experience of a tiny flood, was that although freezing is what is recommended, it's very hard to get hold of in a flood because of problems with electricity supply and everybody else wanting freezers. So what really Barbara is pointing you to is to go along to the library and see some of the work that's been in practice. One of the issues that she's describing that they still have problems with is the limp vellum bindings. These were common in the 1500s. But they really struggled through the flood. They had Christopher Clarkson in, and he's given them, he came up with a new design for these bindings, and they are working on those now on the 1500s and 1600s books. On the plus side from the floods, and we do like to look at optimism, is that at the time of the floods, some young conservators were trained up. Peter Walters and Anthony Kearns get a mention, and they have really develop their skills and become experts and highly proficient in their field and become great masters in conservation. Now, I've been talking all about the conservation that has been done, and you can visit the conservation labs, which is fantastic. And you can even watch a documentary to see what the conservation lab looked like back in 1968, which is on YouTube. So again, I'll be passing the link to the wonderful Seaward team, and that will be available to you. So the other place that Barbara Cattaneo recommended was the Gabinetto GP Visu, an archive of relevant cultural personalities from the 19th and 20th century, which was also flooded. And they recovered quite a lot of paper and photographic materials. And she recommends that you visit there. She also recommends, and it does look beautiful because I've been looking at it on the YouTube videos, the Opificio della Pietrature, which is where a lot of things like metals and sculptures, and again, this is where the Cimabue crosses that Fiona recommended that you went to see, and there's all sorts of things like doors from the cathedral by Ghiberti, and there was quite a lot of other things there to go and see. So I will pass on the extensive notes. I wish you well in your exploration of Venice. I'm sure you're going to have or have had an absolutely fantastic time. And I'd just like to say how inspired I am to be a member of a conservation community where I can write to all sorts of people saying, hello, you've never met me. I have met Fiona before, but would you help me with this question? And the generosity and kindness from one conservator to another is genuinely inspirational. I hope it's been helpful. Over and out.
And as usual, we welcome your comments, questions and corrections. This time we've had a couple of people write in. We've got a message from the Icon Book and Paper Group that the Fred Behrman Research Grant opens for applications on December 1st. It's open to any Icon members so long as it's related to books, paper and archives in some way. They're especially open to more innovative applications, so definitely get your thinking caps on if you're doing anything with books and paper. The next one is from some conservation colleagues in Canada. There's a fundraiser to start a reconciliation working group within the Canadian Association for Conservation of Cultural Property. They are currently raising money for a consultation process and a launch event for the group. It's a really worthwhile cause. We're going to link to the fundraising page, and basically it sounds amazing. So this is our way of working more closely with source communities in Canada, and I'm really thrilled to see this sort of thing being started. The funds raised will go towards the travel for consultations with First Nations, Inuit and Métis, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, organizations and cultural centers across Canada, organizational workshops and training events, translation services, ways of collecting feedback, online meeting software for efficient group meetings, paying a researcher to assist the group, honoraria and gifts of appreciation for speakers and consultants, and online training fees. There is more detail on the fundraising page, but this is amazing. And can I just say, shout out to these people for actually paying people they want to consult with. You need money to make these sorts of things work. So please, please, please do check out their fundraiser. It looks really good, and I cannot wait to see this thing take off. Thanks, guys. You're an absolute inspiration. And finally, we have a correction from Evelyn. In our last episode about diversity, we said that Young Canada Works is wholly funded by the government. That was not correct. Young Canada Works is a program that's asking for 25 to 50% of wages to be funded by the employers. So that's just a correction there. Thanks so much for getting in touch, Evelyn. As usual, if you've got anything on your mind, do let us know. Tweet us, email us, reach out in any way you can. Thanks so much, guys. If you're enjoying the C Word and would like to support our work, then please consider becoming one of our patrons. For as little as $1 per month, you can help us keep our episodes online and more of them coming. Patreon helps us meet our regular costs for the show, and also to plan ahead so we know roughly how much of a monthly budget we've got. That's super helpful when you're trying to do something special like buy a better microphone or save up to go to a special event. Your support also helps keep us free of advertisement. In return, our supporters get access to our archive of extended episodes, which you can only access on our Patreon page. Yeah, for that $1 a month, you get a little extra audio enjoyment. We've crunched the numbers, and it's about 10% extra content on a regular basis. Well, that's not bad for less than a cup of coffee, eh? If supporting us sounds like something you'd like to do, then head over to patreon.com/thecword and join our bunch of absolute champions. Thanks for listening. We're the C Word, and you've been listening to Simon Stevens, Chloe Rumsey, and me, Jenny Mathiasen. Join us next time for an episode about knowing not to. In the meantime, check out our website at thecword.show, tweet us at the C Word Podcast, or simply email us on thecwordpodcast@gmail.com. The intro and outro music is Spring by Didi Music, used under a Creative Commons Attribution License. Additional music and sound effects by Callum Robertson. This has been a Wooden Dice production. Welcome to the C Word, the Conservators podcast. Are you going to giggle? Are you going to giggle?
No, I was going to slurp my tea noisily and you started.
You know what? Get slurp your tea. Everyone have a sip.